Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a la Academia de Cine una vez más. Hoy contamos nada más y nada menos que con Susan Sarandon, la gran actriz americana que ha querido venir a la Academia de Cine para hablar con vosotros. Y por voluntad precisamente de ella, el acto va a consistir exclusivamente en las preguntas que los académicos que estáis aquí queráis hacerle a Susan Sarandon. No necesita mucha presentación Susan Sarandon, pero sí os diré que es una de las mejores actrices de su generación, una de las actrices del cine americano que ha conseguido una serie de películas en las que ha demostrado su inteligencia, su versatilidad, su sentido del humor, y que ha tenido 5 nominaciones al Oscar y ha ganado el Oscar por Pena de muerte, como sabéis, y desde los años 70 está trabajando sin parar. Aunque ha hecho 10, 12, 15 películas que son auténticas obras maestras de la historia reciente del cine, pero ella ha seguido trabajando hasta ahora mismo. Lo último que ha hecho es una película sobre un escarabajo superhombre. Es decir, que ha hecho más de 90 películas, de las cuales hay unas cuantas que son fantásticas. La han llamado los mejores directores del mundo, desde sus comienzos con Billy Wilder o con Mario Monicelli hasta gente como Tim Robbins o Louis Malle, o yo que sé, muchísima gente. Es decir, que tenemos a Susan Sarandon con nosotros y eso nos hace felices una vez más. Cuando quiera.
Well, Susan, welcome. Thank you for having this time with us. We know your schedule is very tight, so we appreciate a lot that you're having this conversation with us. And I would like to start just reminding some words that Pedro Almodóvar said last night to you before giving you the L Award. He said, if the world were governed by women like Susan Sarandon, we would have a fairest world with no war. She deserves the Peace Nobel Prize. Wow, that's a beautiful friendship. And I would like to ask you how Almodóvar's movies influence your career and your life.
I think the movies of Pedro's movies, they're so surprising and moving, and his love of women, all kinds of women, it really introduced me to this kind of storytelling that I think of as being Spanish, and the kind of complexities of women, and also his sense of humor really appeals to me. And it was like a breath of fresh air when I don't even remember the names of the first, but every time that I see a film of his, it's always surprising, and I'm always so in love with all the women that he has, all the different women and men, but especially women. In the United States, there aren't so many films that are star women that have good stories, and especially a number of women. Usually, maybe in an American film, you get 2 women, one older, one younger, and they just automatically hate each other. You're not sure why, but you know, they don't show very many films starring women. That's why when I got a chance to work with women, and when I produced some films, it was very important for me to grab onto anything that had other women, because you just don't get a chance to work. So Thelma and Louise was really fun to have another person that's in the lead that's female. Mm-hmm. So I think when I think of Almodóvar, I think of just him just breaking open all the norms that I had previously thought of, especially as foreign films. Personally, I think the first time we really spent a lot of time together was at the lead up. It was at the Academy Awards in Los Angeles. I don't remember if I was nominated or if I was presenting, but it was right on the eve of going into Iraq. And there was a large demonstration, as there were demonstrations all over the world. And he was one, we marched together, we walked together at that time. And then after that, I live in New York, and after that he came to New York and we were able to spend some more time there. So I think of him also as someone who is not just in a bubble, who is aware of what's going on in the world and who cares about peace. And then I was very fortunate because I had an award a number of years ago, and he presented that award to me at a time when I was being censored in the United States, and Spain honored me. So that was really fabulous to leave my country where I was being having a lot of trouble because of my political noise. And then I got this invitation to come to Spain, and I felt like Joan of Arc or something. I was like, wow, thank you very much. It's so nice to be somewhere where I wasn't getting in trouble. And he showed up then in Sevilla, I believe it was, and he took me around a little bit then, and that was really fun too.
The question is, when are you going to work together? We really want to a movie.
Well, just pass this on to him. He just made a movie with two people speaking English. And I am not one of them.
So now is the time.
Yeah, and one of them doesn't even have an American accent. They had to get an American accent. So, I didn't want to bring that up last night, but I was disappointed when I saw that. They're two fabulous actresses, but I don't know. I'm blacklisted again, so maybe that had something to do with it. But
okay.
I would love to work with him. I think he clearly loves women, but loves actors, and I'm sure that he's very playful. And for me, that's everything, is to be able to, when you work, have a sense of play. Is very important for me. I really, really try to have a good time no matter what the movie's about, so I can stay loose when I work. And so it is important for me to be in a fun atmosphere. But ask him that question.
Okay, I will, yeah. Okay, Javier Bardem said, quoting Al Pacino, that a good career is made of the parts you refuse, not the ones you accept. Do you agree with that? Have you had like a big no in your career?
Well, the men get a lot of the great parts. Obviously, if he had turned down Godfather, that would have been stupid. Mm-hmm. But I have to choose from what I'm offered, and often I'm offered something that isn't quite ready. The script is still, needs work. Thelma and Louise was like that. So I think a career is made. Well, this is if you're talking about career, it sounds kind of like Al Pacino is talking about being honored and being recognized and having a successful career. I think I'm just so lucky to do this. So I don't know why I'm getting upset. So there are so many great actors who don't get a great director or a great part. Dead Man Walking was a book that I found, and I made that happen. Stepmom was something I made. A lot of people are now, women now are being able to get a hold of books and do it, but you still need some of the Hollywood machine in order to get it seen. So there are so many wonderful little films and magnificent big performances that people just do not see. And they're considered unsuccessful because they're not making money. But if you work because you love it, then, you're successful. I guess my heart just breaks for all the people that go into the business and it is a business and they want to do things and they have amazing ideas and they just, even now you can make films really cheaply, but you can't necessarily find a place to distribute them where people can see them, and that's too bad because it's a shame that we're so competitive in such a heartless way. Sports has become so corporate and telling stories has become so corporate. All these corporations that have taken over Hollywood. And a lot of the agencies handle video games and, the days when you had people in studios making films because they loved films. That doesn't exist now, really. I mean, I'm so happy to work and to every job is like visiting a new planet where you have to learn a new language and a new power structure and you have to figure out why you're doing it and who you're working with and it's the collaboration that I love. So, if you don't get a Godfather but you get a story that you really love, then you should tell it. You can't wait. Al Pacino, I've worked with him a few times, and he's great. But men also have a different group of stories to choose from that are predominantly male-driven, right? I mean, in the United States, I don't know. In Europe, are there more female-driven films? I see this. No. Well, I guess we have to tell our stories. We need more people that write for women, and I'm all about love stories. That's every single film I've done I think of as a love story, and anytime someone is brave enough to reach out to another person and be intimate, no matter the gender, the age, whatever, that's to me something that encourages people to be the protagonist in their own life. And that's something I feel is really important that we encourage is to honor the humanity in people. And so whether or not it's a comedy or, that element of it for me just is so important. And every time I am able to do something, I would like to get the big movies that, are going to go on a world tour to do press, and they're going to all already have the rooms ready to screen for the Academy Awards. But those are all the, Universal and, all the big conglomerates have the control over that system. Every now and then some little film squeezes in there and shocks everybody, and then everyone gets very nervous. But, the real essence of film, there used to be so many small movie theaters where you could see in New York. When I was with Louis Malle, he would take the film around to all of the little tiny independent theaters, and you could see foreign films, and you could see, little films, and little by little they've all been eaten up. So there's very few of those possibilities in the United States. I don't know about in Italy if you can see weird little American films here. I don't know. Can you see them at all here? Yeah,
some
a
of
little
them,
bit.
not that much really. Yeah.
Do you have, on television, do you have platforms where you can find those films that are not getting released? Oh, well, that's good.
Filming, for example. Yeah.
Where?
Filming, it's called the platform.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, it's not as mystical as sitting in a dark theater with having communion with all the other people that are sitting in a dark theater and experiencing a film together. That's really great, but at least you get a chance to see them.
And here goes my last question before handing over to the academics. You say there's nothing braver than being vulnerable. I love it. I think that you have built your career over that idea with all your characters. And my question is, Is it increasingly difficult nowadays to balance between a career and speaking up on your values?
Well, I don't think there's any balance. There's no balance. I think when you're outspoken, it's because you have no choice. I mean, I don't see how if you're an artist and you see what's going on now, you could be quiet. That's who you are. And making film, telling stories is also who I am. And I don't know how you balance it. And family, you know. Now my kids are older, so that's a little bit easier. Is there a balance? I think just when you direct or when you write or when you paint or that's just who you are. It's not separate from who you are. And if you see something that's, well, in my case, I'm paying for what's going on in Gaza and Palestine. So I'm very personally involved because it would stop tomorrow if we stopped paying for it. So it's not just some kind of abstract concept that exists far away that you're seeing horrible pictures. It's something that actually I'm responsible for. So of course, if I can get information to people, because a lot of people just don't have information. There's a lot of people who are good people who just have gotten very wrong information or none at all. And but I don't know that there's a balance. I think whatever's asked of you, you do. And if you have a story you want to tell, or if someone gives you a story that, when I read a script, I know right away if it's something that in some way interests me. If there's a character that I like that I haven't done before. It doesn't matter if it's a lot of money or a little bit of money. It used to matter if it was during the school year because of my children, because I dragged them everywhere when they were little. So that was a consideration, but now it's more or less is when I read it, am I moved? What does the story talk about? You know, I think it's very important. I think every film is political. Some of them solidify the status quo, and some of them challenge the status quo. But even a comedy, I don't know if you're familiar with The Nutty Professor. That's a very political film. You actually watch that film and you want the girl to go with the fat guy, not the cool guy. And it forces you to see things through his eyes. That's an incredible statement, you know. It really changes things. And I think if any kind of film that you watch that you can go out afterwards and have a discussion or a fight or anything, that's what it's meant to do, you know. And so I think you have to be very careful what you choose to put your energy into, because that's going to be seen by people. And I know people have come up to me and said that a certain thing that I did in a film changed their lives, and I never would have expected that. The films that you, like Stepmom, something that you don't think of as a big deal, not a Dead Man Walking. Obviously, Dead Man Walking was going into an area that was very controversial. But the hunger, I mean, the Rocky Horror Show. People come up to me and say, oh, the Rocky Horror Show changed my life. I'm like, wow, that's fabulous. You know, wow. So I think we have to be careful and really so proud to be able to write stories that inspire people and move people and develop empathy and encourage imagination, because nothing can change if you can't imagine it first. And so that's why I think artists are very dangerous people to power. Always in times of a lot of control, artists are the first ones to get rounded up and silenced, because it's very powerful to be a writer or even a painter, anybody that can move people. And especially, how cool is it to go into a dark room and sit there and just let these images and stories play over you? You know, that's really special. Even on an airplane, how many people go crying on films on an airplane? It's crazy. Yeah. I don't know why that is. It's like there's more people crying on airplanes watching these movies in this little place all by themselves, sobbing. So I guess everybody here is kind of involved in some part of, right? And some part of the arts of some arts. So you should all be so, congratulations.
Okay, now it's time to hand over to the academics. Podéis preguntar, alzad la mano y os iremos dando la palabra. Por ahí.
Hola, me gustaría preguntarle a Susan sobre ese ¿cómo se llama? ¿Cómo se dice la palabra? Ese movimiento implícito que tiene con la sociedad, que le ha llevado a distintas partes en su carrera, y que sea un poquito qué película hubiese hecho que le hubiese gustado hacer.
I have never been asked that question before. I mean, I think that any of the movies that have worked really well that are about change, I think were perfect, and I can't imagine myself in them. I don't know how to answer that. I'll have to get back to you. That was very tricky. I'm trying to think of what films. You know, I think there's a lot of amazing women that I meet, or people that nobody knows about, that I would love to do documentaries about. Documentaries now have become so beautiful and so well done, you know. I think that I did one about Hedy Lamarr, a documentary called Bombshell about Hedy Lamarr, which was a very interesting process. And I've done some other little ones about people that have been educational but not played in big theaters. And I think I'd like to do more of them, because there's so many stories. There's just so many stories that are so interesting, that make you honor you see that there's so many wonderful people doing work, have a purpose that people don't know about, you know, people that whose lives have been dedicated to not just helping people, but the pursuit of just, in a quiet way, music or something in a little town, a guy making violins out of tin cans and stuff for kids and teaching them just to play. And you think, wow, you know, this is a giant of a person people should know. So I think I'd like to do maybe more of that. I love traveling around and asking questions and finding out. I don't know so much what I have to do, what I would like to play, but I think being part of those kind of projects would be fun for me. You're welcome.
Yo, por influencia de Hunger, estoy ansioso y quiero hacerle 3 preguntas.
Adelante.
La primera es que ella llegó a trabajar con compañeros, incluso con algún director del viejo Hollywood, como por ejemplo Jack Lemmon, Henry Fonda, Burt Lancaster, Walter Matthau, Billy Wilder, etc. ¿Hasta qué punto han cambiado las cosas desde aquel primer cine en el que usted entró y el cine que se hace ahora en Hollywood? Esa es la primera pregunta. La segunda no tiene nada que ver, y es que a mí me inspira muchísima curiosidad una película que se llama Una árida estación blanca, que dirigió Eusan Palsi, que es la primera vez que ella fue dirigida por una mujer en un país que no era el suyo, en Sudáfrica, y 20 años después de haber empezado su carrera. Y luego tardaría otro tanto en ser dirigida otra vez por otra mujer, que fue Gillian Armstrong en Mujercitas, ¿no? Y la tercera es esa gente con la que ha trabajado, tipo John Turturro, con el que repite de vez en cuando películas independientes, o gente como Frank Pearson o Frank Perry, gente muy de, digamos, del off Hollywood, me imagino, ¿no? Que, en fin, que nos contara algo de todo eso. Yo seguiría haciéndole preguntas hasta esta noche, pero creo que ya he abusado suficiente.
Okay, I'll just start telling stories. Billy Wilder that was interesting because at that time, I had never been to Hollywood. I had only worked in New York. I live in New York, and I had never been to Hollywood. And I didn't really audition for it. Somehow they offered it to me, but Universal was the studio, and they wanted me to sign a 7-year contract, and I couldn't have approval over anything. So even when I was young, that didn't sound like a good idea. So I said, no, I can't do it. So I lost the job. And then I wrote him a note, and I said, I just want you to know that, we didn't make this agreement, not because of money or anything. And then I explained to him what my problem was. And then some weeks passed, and then I got the job. So he must have stepped in and helped. So then I go to California for the first time, and I'm staying at the Chateau Marmont before the Chateau Marmont became as risque, as big deal as it is. And I was staying there while I was looking for an apartment. And even before we started, I went in for to try on my wardrobe. It was a tiny part, but I had maybe 4 costumes. And so we had the screen test, and I went in all my little flapper costumes, and he didn't like any of them because he said that they didn't show my long neck. So he canned all of them, and we were supposed to be filming like 2 days later. And I was like, wow, this is what Hollywood's about. This is crazy. Then the first day of shooting, one of the character actors who played part of the reporters, very famous character actor, he was stumbling on his lines, and he fired him right on the spot. So now everyone was terrified because that script was almost like a play. He used to direct with a stopwatch. He would say, okay, that was, 35, let's get it down to 27, and he would have his watch. So you had to be perfect on all of the language, and he was right because it had to move very quickly. And then the other thing was that he wanted everyone, back in the day of film, usually during lunch they would show dailies, and he wanted everyone to go to see the dailies, and I couldn't stand to look at myself on film. And so he was very upset with me that I didn't want to go to see the dailies. Then the other thing that happened was the day I was supposed to leave the Chateau Marmont and move into an apartment, I had all my stuff packed, and I had my big bag that had like my poetry in it, my diary, and all the per diem that I had saved for this apartment. And someone came in the night and stole my bag.
Oh, wow.
And it had to be an inside job because there was no other way. Someone had to have a key to come into my room. So I went to the set. I think it was at Fox, I'm not sure. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And Walter Matthau said, oh, honey, that's terrible. And he took out his wallet, and he just peeled off like a bunch of hundreds because he was a gambler.
Oh, wow.
So he always had a lot of cash in his wallet. And there's another story, but I don't think I can tell it.
Come on, yeah. No. Come on, Susan. Tell us, yeah, please.
Oh, God. Maximilian Schell. well, first of all, I didn't really drive. And I would walk around the Chateau Marmont to to go get something to eat or whatever. So they were always picking me up thinking I was a hooker because nobody walked. And I wasn't a hooker. I was just an actor, which is, I guess, adjacent to a hooker, but not a hooker. And Maximilian Schell, who at that time, I don't know if you know who he is, but he'd gotten an Academy Award, and he was a very handsome older guy. Anyway, he took a liking to me, and he asked me out to dinner a few times, and nothing really happened. And then one day when I came home, my bed was filled with roses. Wow. That somehow Maximilian Schell had managed to get into my room. So when I was robbed, they said, has anyone been in this room besides? So then they thought Maximilian Schell was somehow responsible for breaking into my room. But he wasn't, I don't think. Anyway, that's the most I can tell of that story. And then female directors. This is the thing. People, it's like female leaders. It doesn't necessarily, because you have a vagina, mean that you're a good person. If you're a female director, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're kind and listen and do the things that you would think of as what a woman could do better than a man. There are male directors who have been much more in tune, much more sensitive than one of the female directors that I did work with, who was absolutely cruel to the kids in the cast. And I wouldn't work with her again when it came up. So one would hope that women would be able to have the sensitivity and have a different kind of power than a male energy. But it doesn't always happen. And when people say, what's the difference between an American and a European director, that also, I think that's a little blurry sometimes too. But a lot of directors that are American come out of television, and therefore things are very overlit. When I did Pretty Baby, the crew had no idea who Louis Malle was. They had no idea who Sven Nykvist was. And the whole first week, they did nothing but well, let me preface this by saying that there wasn't one non-alcoholic drink on the set. There was just tons of beer on ice, if that gives you a little bit of an idea of the caliber of the crew. They just kept bringing in lights that Sven kept taking out, because they had done a lot of race movies and race car movies and things like that. And until they saw the dailies, like a week later, they were so disrespectful of the DP because they had no clue. And that's a beautiful shot film, whatever you think of the film. It's, Sven, I worked with him also on King of the Gypsies. And he's an artist, he paints with light. But I think in the United States, I've noticed on sets the last 10 years that everything is just blasted out, very harsh light, too much light. And the editing, it's so frustrating. A lot of editors just go line to line to line. They don't have any pause for reactions. If you see a film that really moves you, it's because you're seeing other people and their reaction. Or I did something called Bernard and Doris, which was a short film with Ralph Fiennes about Doris Duke. And everything was in the pauses. And the first cut of that movie made me seem like a maniac, because really the connection, they were witnesses to each other's lives, but they weren't together. They were in love, but he was gay and she was an heiress, but she left everything she had to him when she died, and he basically was this amazing love story between the two. I highly recommend Bernard and Doris. Rafe is amazing, but when it was first edited, it just went from one to the other to the other, and most of what they said was in reaction to a completely different moment. So the whole meaning of it was changed, and we had to sit down and go through and see that before I said that, I looked to him. and then I said it to the other person. You know, it made a huge difference. And I think now the tempo of television, the commercial breaks of television, the car chase, the ADHD sensibility of things going, you know, it's very rare where something is allowed to have its own pacing in a film that's made in America. There's a certain formulaic thing that the powers that be, the studio, has a certain algorithm or formula that they're used to, that they want, and then that's what they do. So the joy of these little tiny films is that there aren't 12 people by the, you know, watching on the, what do you call it? You know what I'm talking about, the monitor. Thank you, the monitor. Back in the old days, the director used to be on the set, watching in person. You know, they could see that you had a tear coming down your eyes. When I was doing Witches of Eastwick, I think George Miller said, you know, could you, you know, maybe that you need to be more upset. And I said, there's tears streaming down my face. And he couldn't see them because he was at the monitor, you know, another room away. So when you want to please the director, or at least I do, the director's like, you know, the captain of the ship. The director, you know, as an actor, you can sit in the back seat and go, oh, let's go there. Or oh, that's a nice place. But he has to, or she has to get you there. And so, you know, you're very free to come up with all of these suggestions. In Thelma and Louise, I asked Ridley Scott, I said, I just got to get out of this car. I'm so sick of this car. Can't we just have a moment where I'm out of this car in the desert? And, you know, she understands it's towards the end, and she understands, and she's going to have to pay the price for this. And maybe I take off my watch, I get rid of my watch, I get rid of my, you know, whatever. Now, that's just a silly actor making a suggestion, and he took it. But as an actor, you don't think, okay, now they're going to have to spend 7 hours lighting the fucking desert, you know? That you don't think that way as an actor, because that's not your job. Your job is just to kind of flow and make ideas. And then sometimes the third thing happens where you say, no, that's going to take too long, but we could do this. And then you go, oh, yeah, well, that's even a better idea than we started with. And for me, that's what's really fun about acting, is when you get in those situations. But you need to have someone with a vision like Ridley Scott. And I think that now a lot of, if you make a boot and it's successful, the studio does not want you to go to a sandal. You know, they want you to stay in the lane that was predictable and where it was productive and where it made money. So they're never looking for something different than what you've already proven you could do. And so, does that answer any of your questions?
Queda una de the left. Fernando. Oh, yeah.
Chas Palminteri, yo qué sé, gente con la que ha trabajado con una cierta frecuencia, con una cierta insistencia, películas que muchas han tenido recorridos comerciales pequeños, pero que indican algo en su manera de elegir las cosas, ¿no?
John Turturro is fabulous. He's so confident and so playful. When I don't even think we had $1 million to do one of the. Sometimes I say yes to something that he says because I figure he'll never get the money. I ended up doing one film that was so ridiculous because I said, honestly, John, I never thought you would get the money for this film. But the one that I did with, for instance, there was a scene with Chris Walken in Romance and Cigarettes. And I have to say, when I did a film with Kate Winslet a few years ago, and we hadn't seen Romance and Cigarettes in years and years and years, and we were like, oh, that would be fun to show the other people in the cast. We were in England, and it was Sam Neill, and who else was it? Anson Boone, and it was a very small cast, so we thought, oh, we'll have a screening. of this film because we hadn't seen it. What fun! And we started watching. And we were like, "This is so weird." We had no idea when we were doing it how weird it was. You know, she sings a whole song underwater with her hair going, and I mean, it's insane. But we were doing a scene, Chris Walken and I, outside, and it started raining. And John just got a bunch of umbrellas, and we all started dancing, including him, and he wasn't even in the movie. You just see him kind of go by. And that's, you know, to find somebody that can kind of roll with the punches, but at the same time, he has so much heart. That movie is very dirty and very funny, but also really moving. Romance and Cigarettes, if you want a strange film, if you can find that. It's a musical, by the way. Everybody in it sings, but they sing, they lip sync to famous songs. James Gandolfini goes out in the morning, and we've had a fight, whatever, and he just starts singing a cappella, and then, you know, all these other people join in, and the garbage collectors are dancing, and you know, it's kind of unusual, and he's just lovely in it. And Kate, too, is very... I'm kind of the boring one, because I'm always playing the boring one, the one that holds everybody together. But Kate is not the boring one, and she's fabulous. And also, James is so sweet. That was like one of the last films that he did. It was right before he passed.
And John Turturro has already finished film with Almodóvar.
Yeah, so how come he got hired? Yeah.
Okay. Please.
Hola, Susan. Gracias por estar aquí. Tengo mucha curiosidad en saber si en Estados Unidos, en la cultura de Estados Unidos, sucede lo mismo que en España. En España vivimos tiempos, hace ya muchos años, políticamente muy polarizados, en los que una parte muy grande de la sociedad española tiene auténtica animadversión al mundo de la cultura, es particularmente al mundo del cine. Se maltrata en las redes actores, técnicos, y se nos menosprecia en una parte muy grande de la sociedad española, atendiendo a sus pensamientos políticos. Estoy muy interesada en saber si en Estados Unidos, apreciando la diferencia de que la industria norteamericana es infinitamente más grande y creo que puede convencer a más personas, sin embargo, quisiera saber si la cultura cinematográfica, si los actores, los técnicos, los artistas, los directores del cine de Estados Unidos sentís esa presión de la parte de la derecha o, bueno, republicana o lo que sea, como se va en Estados Unidos. Muchísimas gracias.
Well, first of all, we've elected a few very bad actors to very high positions, so that's a little confusing. So maybe they just resent good actors. I don't know. It's complicated what's going on. I mean, certainly control of the narrative is very important. There is a love-hate relationship with actors because there are very, very right-wing actors. Like, there's a Trump guy that, you know, I think people elected him because they thought he could run a business because he was on a fake reality show where he ran a business, but in fact, he's a terrible business person. But watching him in that show made people think that he was... I mean, I'm from New York, so I know what Trump is. People in the rest of the United States thought he was this big, strong man who fired people and did this and did that, but he was a terrible business person. So that character got him elected. And, of course, and the fact that there was a vacuum and there was no other choice, that Hillary Clinton was not a good choice, you know, for many, many reasons. I think that there's a myth that Hollywood is left-wing, but it's not at all. I mean, recently we just had this incident at the Academy Awards where Jonathan Glazer, I think his name, I don't know if you saw the film.
Yeah.
That he got the Academy Award for, yeah.
The Zone of Interest, yeah.
Yes. right? Brilliant film about the Holocaust, just, and very relevant with the silence that's going on now and the banality of war and all of those things. And then over 1,000 people wrote a letter condemning, in the business, I'm talking about actors, writers, directors, but mostly agents, producers that are all obviously Zionists, wrote a letter condemning him for his speech, which was a very scary and kind of sad thing to have happen. So clearly they're not liberal, they're not progressive, but they're in a very important place right now, in a very, let's say, powerful, not necessarily important, but powerful place. There's a lot of division. I mean, I was talking to some other artists that have been canceled in Germany. Laurie Anderson was one of them, you know, who's very interesting. And talking about how maybe we could have a listening tour. I think people that react that way are people that are so full of hate, are frightened people, really. They're frustrated people. They're people whose lives are not happy. I mean, holding on to that much hate can't possibly make you happy. You know, it's if hate is your raison d'etre, think of what a miserable life you have. So I think there's a lot of jealousy from people that are miserable toward people who create. That's such a gift, to be able to create, to be able to do anything. And also people are looking for connection. That's what art is about. It's all about connection, right? So as actors, as musicians, to be able to, to make a living connecting people is astounding. And think of how many people are in jobs they hate and that are miserable and need someone to blame, and joy, just the expression of joy is such a revolutionary act. And that's where we are now. And so it's understandable that they would lash out. I think the only way to reach people like that is to listen, is to let them just go on and just listen. Because when you can really, people want their kids to be fed, they want to be safe, they want to have joy in their life, they want to have control over their life somewhat. And in the United States, we don't have health care. There's so many homeless on the street. People can't send their kids to college. They're one sickness away from losing their home, or one catastrophe away from losing their home. There's no, I think for everyone in the world, there's no predictability of anything anymore. The economy, politics, the weather. We're precarity, that's what's happening now. And actually, as artists, we stand the best chance of survival because we have to make do in unpredictable situations. We're constantly adapting. I mean, that's probably the best gift I've given my kids, who I've just pulled around all over the place. They can exist in a situation that is not guaranteed. And now the whole world is at that place. And people don't like it. And I understand why they don't like it. And you're working so hard, and you don't know, you don't have a future. There's no guarantee of your future. As artists, we're used to that. You know, we know we don't know when we're getting a vacation. We know we don't know when we're going to get a paycheck. Even if you've got a film, it could be canceled. Even if you got a TV series, it can go under. You know, you can. I've been talking to people, painters and writers, who, one writer on his book tour, because he's Palestinian, his whole thing was just stopped in the middle of his book tour. Another painter whose things were all put in the basement because he had followed a tweet, and they saw it and they put him down, you know. What's going on in the United States right now is a very, very heavy censorship. You can be fired as the janitor who's worked in a university for 20 years, and if they see that you have followed something they don't like or tweeted something they don't like, that's it, you're done. all over, journalists who can't, are getting fired. And when I got fired, I talked to the Center for Constitutional Rights, and and I was at one of the first heads that rolled, right? They made an example of me. And when I talked to them, they said, you have no idea how many people are losing their jobs all over because of this. And I said, well, maybe, the worst thing is the loneliness. The worst thing is feeling, you're cut off from your tribe and you're ostracized and you're all alone. Maybe we should have a Zoom or we make a list of all these people so they could see how many other people are in the same situation. And he said, yeah, but where would we put it? The New York Times is firing people. The LA Times is firing people. The Washington Post is firing people. Columbia University, you've been following what's been going on campus. They're deporting these kids. In order for them to take them off campus, they had to take them out of school and say they no longer were in school, which meant they lost their visa, they lost their housing, and they deported them. They took all their clothes and threw them out on the street and told the other students that they couldn't touch them or they would be on the list. They drove a truck around with their names and faces and addresses. And nobody paid the price for that because those big schools are endowed by big money. It's heavy going in the United States right now. Yeah, it's like McCarthyism, totally. Yeah. So thanks, Spain, for letting me come. España. No, you guys have been so great. I'm telling you, when you're in the United States and you see that Spain and Ireland and Norway have declared Palestine a state, you're like, yes, somebody, people speaking out. I mean, Ireland has been amazing. Spain has been amazing. It's really, 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 really important what you guys are doing. I can't tell you. It's so important because there's not many places to look that are hopeful in the United States. It's the kids and the unions that are the sign of hope in the United States right now. They are so well educated. They are so well organized, and they are pissed off. And they are strong as hell, and it's so beautiful because I've spent a lot of time with them leading, and an awful lot of them are, at least half are Jewish. So I feel bad for them because they're getting lumped in intentionally with Zionists because that's the way we've been taught, So know that every demonstration, everything that we see online that is happening in Spain is very, very, very important. And I thank you for that.
Quería preguntarle sobre el trabajo que tuvo con David Bowie y con Tony Scott en El Ansia, que fue la primera película suya que yo vi, que me dejó estupefacto. ¿Cómo fue trabajar con Bowie, con Tony Scott y con Catherine Deneuve? Gracias.
That was so much fun. That was before I had children. Well, it was Tony's first movie, and I have to say he was very collaborative because, both of the Scotts, and there's only a few of us have worked with both of the Scotts. They came out of commercials, obviously, and so they had so much talent in terms of the picture, but they weren't necessarily working from the script and the characters up. But Tony was very, very collaborative, so sweet, much more, Ridley's kind of like the wizard, and Tony was like the kind of bantam cock, he was like really feisty and really funny and really accessible. Ridley is much cooler. And when we were, well, of course, Catherine and David were great. But about 3/4 of the way into the movie, there was this big scandal in Hollywood, and now I can't remember, maybe it's better I don't remember the guy's name because I'd get sued. But one of the producers stole part of the budget and disappeared. So they were like, okay, we're cutting now. We're not going to shoot the rest of that. We're not going to do that. And so Catherine and I said, we thought we would be getting sick if we didn't shoot that part. We felt like we might be getting ill. So then there was a whole thing about that. And he was amazing to work with. And when we came to the sex scene with Catherine and I, there really wasn't, they knew the music, but they didn't really have a scene. It was kind of just all the shots were prepared. But I said to him, for me, when you're doing a sex scene, and I had done a few by then, what the most interesting thing is the first move and what happens after. The middle, everybody knows. But what's the first moment that gets you into that, right? And so that's when I wrote the part where I spill the wine, she gives me the shirt, and the first time we touch is in doing that, and then it goes into a kiss. And then we're rolling around all over the place. And so in the middle of the sex, she was supposed to transfuse me, right? I'm supposed to get bitten and transfused. And so then Tony had this paint mixer that went under my head and was doing that to me. That was going to be the part where I'm changing. But then I started to slur my words because I think I was getting brain damaged. And Catherine was the one actually who stopped it and said, okay, that's enough. We can't do that anymore. But he was really fun, and we were in this great house, and we were in London, and it was fabulous. We had great parties, and it was really fun. But the ending, the studio called and said, the reason I wanted to do it, besides the fact that it was Catherine and David, was it was interesting for me, this idea, would you want to live forever if it meant you were a drug addict? And then toward the end of the filming, they said, actually, you can't kill her. She's the funny one. So we have to keep her alive. So then it changed the whole ending of the film, and I still don't understand the ending of the film. It just was a completely different ending, and then I'm there, but I'm not, and and she's up with the ghosts in the attic, and because when you do a sci-fi film, you have to figure out the rules. The same thing happened with The Witches of Eastwick. We had these dolls, and we kept saying, well, I don't know, what's the bit with the dolls? Like, do they all have to be together? How do we get him? Because when we did The Witches of Eastwick, we went double the schedule. It was supposed to be a 3-month shoot, and it was 6 months because they hadn't figured out the movie when we started. And, well, anyway, when I got there, I was supposed to play the part that Cher played. And when I got there, they told me I was playing a different part. I do not play a musical instrument. I had to learn to play the cello in like 2 weeks. Not to mention the fact that my part didn't even go to the end of the script. So I got screwed, but they told me if I left that they would sue me. And anyone that tried to hire me, they would sue for enticement to breach. And I was a single mom with a 18-month-old daughter. So I stayed, and it wasn't great. And but the problem was, we all got along, but the problem was that they didn't know how to end the movie because they didn't know, they hadn't figured out the rules. They had all these different writers coming in, and so we kept shooting. What George did, this was the first time George Miller, his first experience in Hollywood, so he didn't really know how to deal with them. So we would come in, and he would just shoot inserts all day long, because he didn't want to shoot the scenes. So you can imagine the DP was going crazy. We didn't know what was going on, but he would just spend the bulk of the day, like 12 hours, shooting inserts, and then we'd lose the sun, and then we couldn't shoot the scene, and then new scenes would come in. And they said, well, we're just going to shoot these scenes, and we'll call them indiscriminate scenes, which means they can go anywhere. which of course means they're not going to go anywhere because if it's an indiscriminate scene, you don't need it, right? So we shot those for a long time, and finally we used to eat lunch with Jack. Well, I used to eat lunch with Jack. The other two never ate, but I ate with Jack. And my daughter. And we finally said, look, you have to do something. You're the only one that really has any power here. You have to, maybe we need to stop for like 4 days. Just let them sit down and try to figure out the ending, you know, try to figure out what's going on. And eventually it turned out fine, but I mean, it went double the time that it was supposed to. We were there 6 months instead of 3 months. I think that's the longest. They would never do that now. They would probably just stop shooting and throw it out or something. They probably wouldn't even finish it.
Mm-hmm. I think we have time for one more question. Is there over there?
Okay, considering everything you said, and consider I do believe any kind of art is political and any gesture it is, considering or that we have to choose where to put our energy, talking about women, talking that having a vagina, it doesn't mean that we are better, considering we are...
Well, I think we're better because we have a vagina, but I don't think that we necessarily make better choices just because of our vagina. Yeah.
Well, considering everything you have said about connecting, I would like to talk about women and future. And maybe it's a short question, but big but short. If you could choose a landscape or a conflict as a woman, what we should talk, what we should tell from our imaginations, what rules we have to break. I think it's a big, big thing for 5 minutes, but maybe if you have to choose right now, right here, right now, from your intuition, one idea, one conflict, one landscape you will love to travel to from that sense of joy, that attitude you have that by the way, I want to thank you, your attitude inside the movies, outside the movies, your words inside the movies and outside the movies, and your beauty as a philosophical thing, your gravitas inside the movies and outside the movies. Right now, which idea or which conflict would like to talk about?
That's a hard question. I think that there's 2 ways to go about that. For instance, you could do a story about these amazing doctors that are staying in these hospitals right now. Some of them from all different countries that are going and just working in an impossible situation. How do they even survive when they come home? Because I don't know how the PTSD of what that means, you know. You could frame a story about that. But also there's the stories that are small stories that encourage people to be the protagonist in their own lives. And those move me just as much because they're more difficult to tell when you have, you know, you just don't know the story of the woman sitting across from you in the bus and what she's been through and what she has to do to keep her family together. And those people that are unsung heroes interest me a lot, you know, because more of us are going to be in those situations than in a war zone. And I think that it's very... it's not easier to tell a story in a war zone, but you have the conflict there. And even going on Instagram, you can hear these people talking and you get a sense. And thank God for iPhones, you're seeing all of this stuff. So I think that the redemption of women individually, the strength of women to do the simple things like keeping your family together, to in such difficult times, you know, also interests me a lot. And maybe there's a way to influence and change those lives. It's almost as difficult, you know, to have the courage to leave a difficult situation. I mean, what interested me about the movie I did with Jimmy Spader, White Palace, there was a lot of sex in it, but really what it was about was class. And what it was about was leaving someone who's ashamed to be seen with you. How painful is that, you know? And those are the situations that you can't get out of. If someone beats you up, you stand a better chance of breaking that relationship than you do when you're in a situation of constant demeaning, or, you know, how do you protect your children? These kind of things. And I think also the love between women is so beautiful, you know. I think that I'd like to see more of love between women. And also, I'm not ready to give up on the guys. You know, I really think that they have a very rough time. You know, the men rule the world, men are entitled, and then it doesn't work out that way. You know, and I think that we need good men. We need good sons. We need to be in it all together too. So I think we need to give men a chance to be a hero in a gentler way, and that they get stuck with these macho, non-feeling things. You know, even smart guys, when they're raising their sons, make those mistakes. And when I was in Nicaragua in '84, during the revolution, I was talking to a woman who, she was studying to be a doctor, and then when the revolution came, she liberated the first city that was liberated in the army. And I said, that's so amazing that you, and she said, no, when all the guys were killed, that's when the women were allowed to come out of the kitchen. It wasn't that they chose that. You know, that happened, but it wasn't a choice of the men, because she said that it's the mother who passes on this toxic masculinity to the son. She said it's like hemophilia. And I think as women raising sons, you know, we have to be careful of that. So all of those things to me are very interesting. I think Almodóvar shows a lot of the complexities of women too, you know, that's and the potential for a toxic relationship between mothers and sons. But I guess that didn't really answer the question, but I guess because I don't really know the answer. But there's so many, I mean, there's so many. I guess my feeling is that if you choose a war-scape, that kind of movie can get done, and it's a very broad stroke movie. The movies that take more of a sensitive storytelling are the more subtle ones, and I think that they can affect change in a very deep way. But it takes real artists to write that and to direct that. Yeah. Thank you.
And last question.
Well, my name is Azucena de la Fuente. I'm an actress. And I want to thank the Academy and Elle, the magazine, for bringing you here. It's an honor to have you here. I also want to tell you that I always felt attracted by your light in your characters, and I think that's very important. Therefore, I'd like you to share with us a little bit briefly the way you prepare your characters. Okay, thank you.
A technical question, thank you.
Yeah, after all this.
Well, first of all, let me say that I never studied acting. I know this is probably not a good thing to say, but I kind of fell into it. And so I have a way of working. First of all, as I said, if I'm reading a script, I have to be moved. And I have to like that character, even if she's not a nice person. Because I feel, again, that people that do cruel things are in pain. And so if I can understand that motivation, but I don't need to know what Beatle they liked in high school or when they had their first sexual experience, or, I don't need to build a backstory, really. I just have to identify what moves me and be intrigued by how that character is different from other ones. Then when I go through the script, I basically, if there's a scene, first of all, I want to make, when we did Dead Man Walking, there was like 4 or 5 versions of that script, because I don't ever want to be, I want to know in the whole what every scene is supposed to accomplish. And are you pitching or are you catching? Why is that scene in the movie? Even not my scenes, but I don't want to, if there's a scene that's a repetition of another scene similar in value, then I say get rid of it or take that space for something we haven't already seen. Everything should either advance the plot or the character. And if you're being redundant, then you have to find a new value to have for that scene. And if it's not in there, then find a way to do it. And when I'm preparing, I try to stay a few days ahead, at least. I mean, I read the whole script, obviously, but I don't want to, I want to be free enough when I'm doing it that I can kind of go with the flow, because I depend very heavily on what the other actors are doing. I'm probably, my best quality is just that I'm a good listener. I'm really there. And for me, that is the highlight, when you're not judging, when you're not, thinking, is this, it just has to work. It doesn't have to be right or wrong, because you can rationalize anything. That people do crazy things. So, if it seems like a character, I remember one time, I won't say who said it, but we were all around, and one of the women in Witches of Eastwick said, I don't know, I just don't know that she would do that. And I'm like, we just fucked the devil. Really? I mean, like, can you, you know what I'm saying? Now you don't think that maybe, I mean, like, if you can imagine that you're sleeping with the devil, doesn't that open up the world a little bit? So I think that you can rationalize anything, but trying to make it serve the whole is also very important. So I'll be reading, and when a scene changes, I draw a line across the page. And I'll go to the next dialogue, and then if it seems like there's the place to change, so it's not all one kind of key, one feeling, I'll draw another line, just so that I remember that maybe there's a shift there in whatever the character's trying to do or say, or emotionally, or whatever. And maybe I write little things in the margin, but I don't plan. I try to stay open to see, what's going to happen. Of course, on the other end, if you're playing a character that has a real illness, then of course I do as much research. And lately I've been playing a lot of people dying, a lot of people helping people die. That's kind of was my last, like, so many years. So I know a lot about ALS. I know, so I'll do very serious research, try to meet people, read as much as I can so that I have some sense of the reality of it. Or if you're playing a historical figure, when I did Dead Man Walking, I already had become friends with her, because when she gave me the book, Tim just was not even ready to read it. He wanted to do something else. And so it went on for a while, and she became friends. And eventually I just kind of had a big emotional breakdown on 7th Avenue and said, if you don't do this, I'm giving it to someone else. And but I read everything about people's last whatever on death row, about the meals they ate. I watched all of her videos. Of course, I read her book. anything that I could find on that subject, and then it was my job to pull little details. You know, I read one place where the guy asked to try shrimp because he'd never eaten shrimp. For his last meal, he got shrimp. And we put that in, you know, or signing the Bible. That wasn't in the book. That was something from a BBC documentary. So Tim was kind of taking care of the big picture, and I tried to find as many little details as I could to fill that in. And so it's different if you're playing someone. I played Etta Chano, you know, Mussolini's daughter. So I did quite a bit of research about that. So historical characters or someone that has something that's a real situation, I think that preparation is different. But when you're playing a fictitious character, you know, I just want to know what does she want? I think the audience needs someone to root for, and I've played a lot of bad guys, but they sometimes want more passionately than the good guys. You know, what was the movie that Ridley Scott did where people are robots, showing Harrison Ford and what was his name? You know, who played kind of the monster? Blade Runner? What was his name? Who? Blade Runner. Yeah, but what was the guy? You know, the German actor who played... Was it Oscar? Come on, someone in this group knows. Thank you. He was much more interesting than the lead, right? Because he really wanted something. So I think you have to identify what is it that this person needs? What is it that they want? And that is huge. In Thelma and Louise, I didn't think she was... I said to him right from the beginning, I don't want to make a revenge movie. I think she's just trying to figure out why these things happen. And so there's a lot of lines that were added, but also that way I wasn't celebrating when we blow up the truck. I wasn't happy when I killed the guy. I think the difference between that movie and a revenge movie is that she knows killing is wrong. It happens. It's not planned. It's not premeditated. It happens, and she knows she has to pay a price. And that's different than an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie or another revenge movie. I wasn't interested in jumping up and down and celebrating when I killed him. And it was in the script, but I didn't do it. I don't think she was there to execute that guy. I think she was just trying to shut him up. And so I discussed that with Ridley. And I said, at one point when we blow up the truck, I said, do you have a mother? Do you have a sister? You know, what is making these guys think this is cool? Is it that something I'm doing? You know, so that was my that was my path that I decided going in. But how it ended up happening was, you know, decided in the moment. And I loved Gina, and we got along really great, so that was easy. But I knew I didn't want to just do like a revenge film with women instead of guys. I wanted something different. So those kind of decisions I think you can make. And then you just keep dancing when you can on set. You know, you just keep trying to stay open, keep your heart open, and get to the point where you'll make really big mistakes. And that's when the interesting stuff happens.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time.
Thank you all. Thanks so much.